Hi, this is Becky Anderson, and I'm here with Lillian LaValle, my dearest friend,
Hello.
and a cat. And we are going to be talking about the final reflection. Also, I apologize if there's any extra noise in the background. There is, in fact, a cat in here. And so, Lily, during this class, we talked about this one book called The Waiting Years, and I believe I've told you a little bit about it. So the book, at the start, this one lady, her name is Tomo. She comes to, I believe it's her sister or her friend's house, and she's like, hey, me and my daughter are here on vacation, business. She doesn't tell her right away, and then later on, she eventually tells them, yeah, my husband sent me to find him a mistress.
Oh, wait, you did tell me about this book.
I did a little bit, I did.
Yeah.
And, like, in this book, it was so weird because it just, like, showed the differences of how women were just, like, kind of objects to men. Completely. Because, like, this man sent his wife to find him a mistress, and she does. Like, she looks hardcore for a woman for him. And then she eventually finds one. She's, like, she finds this kind of teenager, a preteen, this girl who's about 13, and she takes her back to her husband, and then eventually she gets, during all of this, Tomo is very, angry with her husband, but she can't do anything, and she's very jealous of the girl she brought home for her husband, and later on, her husband asked for more women, and so they bring more mistresses into the household, and then eventually, like, the lady's daughter, grows up, and Tomo recognizes that her life is not gonna get much better. She can't be less of an object to her family or to, like, these men around her, and so she just accepts, like, the mistresses in her house. She accepts them as, like, her daughter as much as, like, her actual daughter is, and, like, they all grow up to kind of be best friends and be all sisters in a way. Except for at one point, they marry off one of the mistresses because her husband he says, like, we should marry these women off, and so Tomo was like, okay, and finds one of them a husband. And during all of this, Tomo and her husband both had a daughter and a son, but their son went and lived with Tomo's husband's parents, and so as, like, the mistresses grow up and everything, they bring the son back, except for they kind of all hate the son because he is extremely annoying, extremely, like, a know-it-all. Like, he's one of those people that just a lot of people don't like. And throughout most of the book, it's just them hating on this man, and this man just being not a great person. And then eventually, they find him a wife, and the wife hates him. She talks to Tomo and is like, I don't like this man. And she eventually passes away in childbirth. And so they find their son a new wife. And she ends up staying longer, but only because her father-in-law, Tomo's husband, and them, they get together.
Oh.
They go on holiday and they get together. And, like, that's the only reason she stays in that household is because she's married to the son, but she's in love with the son's father. And
are all of these women in love with him, or is it just, like, Tomo and...
Kind of, because he's really a big ladies' man, and he has a lot of money.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I feel that. Just a little bit of a gold digger, yeah.
A little.
It happens.
And eventually, the son's wife, she gets pregnant, and they're like, oh no, is it the father's child or is it her husband's child?
Common problems.
Honestly,
modern day world.
Honestly. And then they just kind of, like, don't talk about it. Like, Tomo knows about all this has been going on just because she's been, like, she's kind of read the context clues and everything. She knows the way her husband looks at women.
Yeah.
And
thank you for your input, Rosie.
Thank you. You are a genius. But then, like, throughout this book, the husband's extremely condescending. He finds women all the time. He gets bored with some women. He gets older. And then Tomo and her daughter, they become closer towards the end of her life. And Tomo is kind of known to be, like, the extremely like, strong woman, and, like, she's known to be, a wife. She's known to be who she's married to, but that they're not in love. She's just kind of almost his secretary in a way. Like, she looks after all of his finances, like, all this thing, all these, like, she is kind of like his manager, his secretary, all that kind of stuff. They're not in love anymore. They haven't been for years. But she can't divorce him, because of course not.
Because, yeah, we're in old-timey
Yeah.
America.
And, like...
Sorry.
And, like, she's known to be super strong. Like, she never gets sick. If she does, she never talks about it. She's never in pain, nothing like that. And so one day, I believe she goes to her friend's, no, she goes to one of her old mistresses' house, who they married off to a kind gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
And she, like, she gets a ride there, but on the way back, it's too late in the night. Mm-hmm. She can't get a ride back home, and so she has to walk up this very steep, well, not a steep slope, but, like, up a big hill. Thank you. And, like, she knows that she won't be able to make it up the hill, but she's like, there's no way, like, I have to go up there and I can't go back.
She's an old lady at this point.
Yes,
Yeah,
but she's not, like, old. She's just, like
50, 60.
Yeah, upper middle age area, somewhere
Yeah.
up in there. And, like, she's like, I can't go back to, my friend's house. I can't go back to the old mistress's house because that would be like, hey, I can't get home because I'm in pain, because her legs are hurting her so bad. They're swollen and they're hurting so badly.
Like
and
arthritis or something?
And what?
Like arthritis or something?
Something like that. We find out later it's because of her kidneys are going bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But, and, like, she's been going through this for, like, the past few years, but, like, it's only been bad during the winter. Her legs get bad, but during the summer, like, she's fine, so she's just kind of been like, okay, I'm fine. But then, like, there's this night when she is trying to get home, and she's like, okay, I have to walk up this slope. It's gonna hurt really bad, but I'm gonna get there. And eventually she does. And when she gets there, she sees, the original mistress, and she's like, hey, Tomo, like, are you okay? You look, like, pale as a ghost. You look like you're in a lot of pain. And Tomo's like, just let me sit down on the steps quick. And so she just sits down, and, like, also, mind you, it's been raining this whole time, so she is sopping wet.
Oh, because it took her forever to get that.
Yeah.
At least that far, yeah.
Yeah. And, like, that's when everyone, like, starts to be a little worried about her. And, they're like, but it's Tomo, you know? Like, she's gotta be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, they're like, she's not saying anything either, so she must be fine, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then she, like, tells her daughter, she's like, hey, sweetie, come here. Come up to your room and see how good, like, this certain mountain looks right now. And so she takes her daughter up there, and her daughter's like, okay, Mom, I know you wouldn't just take me away from, like, all these people at our house to be like, look at this. And so she's like, Mom, what's wrong? And Tomo's like, look at my legs. And she, like, pulls up her skirts, and her legs are just swollen, and they look so bad. Hi, darling. And, like, eventually, she convinces her daughter, or they talk, and they agree that, like, the daughter will tell her dad and be like, hey, I kind of, like, I'm worried about Mom. You should get a doctor here. And so he's like, okay, for you, sweetie, I'll do that. Yeah. And so he brings in a doctor, and the doctor comes in, and she's like, hey, Tomo, we can't fix this. It's been too many years you've been dealing with this. Your kidneys are, like, failing. Yeah. You're gonna die within this year.
Oh.
I know. Like, she gets a harsh death sentence. And so, like, at the end of her life, her husband finally comes back to her bedside and is like, hey, I love you. I'm here for you. I'm not going to leave you. But the best part is at the end, she, like, is like, hey, to her husband, she's like, hey, come here. And he is like, what's up? And she's like, don't give me any kind of funeral at all. And to them, that's extremely disrespectful.
Right.
He's like, no, I'm giving you a funeral. And she was like, don't give me a funeral. And also, I've been stealing money from you.
I wonder.
For years.
I wondered when you said she was your secretary, I was like, ooh, girl could be embezzling.
She was taking a lot of money from this man.
I would do that.
She's trying to give her daughters and, like, the girls she views as her daughters better lives.
Absolutely.
Because, like, that original mistress that they had taken
was 13!
And she couldn't have children.
Aww.
And so she couldn't, oh my god.
That scared me so much.
And, like, she couldn't be married off because she couldn't have children. No man would want her because she can't have children. So Toma, I know. So Toma was like, hey, sweetums, I'll get you,
Stop.
I'll save up money for you. I'll make a better life for you. And that's what she had been doing. And she finally tells her husband that. And she's like, hey, I have a lot of money from you. And then he's just like, the end is just him. Like, the final sentence that I remember was like him talking about his ego was completely split in two. And I just, when I read that sentence, I was so proud of her.
Snaps for Tomo.
Honestly, so many snaps. That was so good. And it's just like, that kind of story shows how life used to be in that time. Like, and the fact that, here's the thing, this story is not completely false.
No, I believe that it totally could happen.
Oh,
Absolutely.
hands down. Like, this story was based off of the author's grandma's life.
Oh.
I know, like, I don't know how, like, what details of it were different and everything, but I know that, like, it was based off of her life, and I just, like, that makes me so sad. And, like, the fact that, like, her grandkid was like, hey, Grandma, I'm gonna write this story about you, for you, called The Waiting Years, you know? And, like, it kind of breaks my heart, but, like, at the same time, like, that's how things used to be, and, like, the progression. What?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, men don't understand that's, like, that stuff happened.
I know, completely goes...
Yeah, it just goes, like, over their head, and even when women are like, no, we used to have it bad, they're like, but you have it fine now.
Or they'd be like, well, she had a really nice life. She had a really rich husband. She had a huge house. She had kids.
Right, exactly. Her life was perfect.
Excuse me, no. No. But that's a whole nother story for another time.
Yeah, seriously.
But there was these other stories we read for... Oh, my land.
I'm sorry, that one was me.
There was this other specific story we read that I liked. That was a really good story. That was called Silence. And it was about the time when, in Japan, Christianity was completely outlawed. And, like, if you were Christian and openly practiced it, you would be persecuted.
I didn't know that was a thing that happened.
I didn't either until we read this book and, like, she talked about it in class. I was like, I knew it happened around the world, but I didn't know specifically, like, in Japan and, like, how bad it was.
Yeah, well, what do they practice there?
Like
Buddhism?
Buddhism?
That's what I was gonna say, was it Buddhism? They, like, follow, like, the Chinese culture?
I believe so, something like that. Yeah. And, like, in this book, this book was completely fictional, but, like, it was based off of, like, you know, possible true events.
Right.
So it followed this missionary, like, this specific one missionary. Mm-hmm. And, well, in the book, they always just call him the priest, so I'll just call him the priest.
Okay.
And, in this book, like, it starts out, he's there with, his other missionary friend, Garpe. And, like, they both go there, they're a team, you know, like, they've...
Buddies.
They're going to spread Christianity in a world where it's so persecuted. And, like, it's this heartbreaking story of, like, them falling in love with these people who live at this village, and, like, they just help them out. They give them a place to live. They're like, we love you. Like, thank you for bringing Christianity to us and preaching to us. And the government finding out, and they take, I believe it's 3 people, and they're like, are you Christians? And they're like, yes, we are. And so they're like, step on the fumi. It was this little thing. It was like, a lot of the times it was made out of metal, and it had like depictions of usually Jesus on the cross, but sometimes Mary.
Okay.
And like you'd put it on the ground, and it was just like a little plate that you put on the ground, and if you stepped on it, then you were completely renouncing your faith. Like, then you were... If you stepped on the fumi, you were okay to just walk away. But if you refused to step on the fumi, or even to, like, spit on it, they would either torture you until you did, or flat out just kill you right then and there. And so these 3 men, they were like, I'm not going to do it. We are Christians. We are followers of Christ.
Yeah. God will save us. God will protect us. Yeah.
Like, all that kind of stuff. They're like, we are ready to die for our faith. And they did. The government, like, took them, and deep in the water, well, it was at low tide, they put these crosses in the water, and they tied up the men. They didn't, like, nail them to it, but they tied them up. And over the course of 3 days, the tide would come in, and they can't breathe.
Yeah.
You know, and, like, struggling to be on this cross, to be alive. They passed away after, like, 3 days, but, like, they were, like, the whole town could see them.
Oh my gosh.
It was a heartbreaking story, and like these men, they were like bigger characters that had been there for the priest and Garpe, and like just hearing about them dying like this was absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah, just shattering.
Oh man, and like they were out there for 3 days.
Can you imagine, like, you're stuck on a cross
man.
for 3 days? She's so scary.
And like in the water,
Yeah.
like, that's so much pressure and you can't
And the
breathe.
salt would burn
Ooh.
your lips and your
Yeah.
eyes.
Oh, that would be so. And then that's a lot. Oh my man, child. But yeah, like and then the priest and Garpe, they decided to split ways. They were like, hey, we'll cover more ground if we are apart.
Right.
And so they part ways, and it follows the priest. It like changes from the talking about all of them as if like it's from like third person to going into first person, like at the priest, like it's completely just 100% him. And like it talks about how he finds this one man. I'm gonna call him Kichijiro. He finds him, and he's like completely like, I'll help you out, but like I'm not a Christian. Like he like blatantly is like, I'm not a Christian, like at all. He will never ever say that he's a Christian. We find out that he is, kind of. Like,
He's just afraid.
Yes, and like he's stepped on the Fumi many times.
Yeah.
So like the government is like, yeah, he's not a Christian, like he's
like,
just.
okay, I have a question about
for
this Fumi thing. So like, obviously, like we're both Christians.
Mm-hmm.
If they were like, hey, step on this thing, renounce your faith, and like we did, and then we immediately just went home and we're like, sorry, Jesus, like repented, like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean, like. What would they do? Like, they literally cannot stop that from happening.
They can't, but if they found out that you were practicing again, they would take you in, and probably they would torture you, and then try and get you to step on the Fumi, and then
do
just
it again.
keep
Yeah,
doing
like,
it.
And just like a cycle.
They totally could, because like as soon as you step on the Fumi and walk away, they'd like you're
Forget
off
about
their
you.
radar
Yeah.
until like you're found again.
That's such
or,
a
like,
horrible way, because it's just okay, not to judge the people that
not at all,
are like torturing and murdering these other Christians, but like, what a stupid idea. Like, they could come up with such a better.
I guess also though, sorry.
No, you're good.
To like this culture, it's like all about presentation, like all about the things that they do,
Yeah.
which makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like you see how hard it is for the people to step on the Fumi, because like it shatters them.
Of course, yeah. No, I can see that. Like, you're literally asking like to take that biggest part of yourself and just say no, I'm not associated
and publicly
with
be
it.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I could see how that's like. I mean, I don't know if I'd step on it. I'd probably be like, nah.
I know I wouldn't.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, you could go back and ask for repentance.
Right.
Repentance.
Or like, but like, I don't know. Because like, okay, I have the worst memory. Okay, never mind. We'll just ignore that thought because I'm not gonna remember it. But just like the amount of times that people in the Bible like went to jail for like God and Jesus, and like I don't know, like me putting myself in that situation, I would be like, yeah, let's go to jail. But then they're like, okay, let's torture and kill you. I'd be like,
well,
yeah, but then on the other hand, I'm like, well, God would save me. God would, protect me during this. It would be like a hard mental battle to
extremely.
be like, can I step on this and then just immediately go back and be like, I'm so sorry, or should I just trust that God's got me?
Yeah, because like I guess in your brain, like even in the Bible, it says over and over, every sin is weighed the same. So like
exactly,
it would be the same as like me telling a lie to you, kind of. But like in the way, it's like different emotionally.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know. That'd be a really hard thing to put yourself in, because like the way that they tortured people, like later in the book they talk about when they like eventually they find the priest and they take him in, because like they hear about a couple of priests going around, and they're like they find him because he gets brought in by Kichijiro. Eventually he's traveling with
like
Kichijiro.
Double crossing,
kind of, but it's weird.
What a jerk.
I know. The entire book we're just like, do we love Kichijiro? No, we hate him. Do we love him? We kind of hate him.
Okay.
But like there was at this one point where Kichijiro was like, hey, here, have some of this dried fish, and then they're like, the priest is like, you could be double crossing me here, but I'm starving, so he eats it, and it's really salty, so he's like, I really need water, like I can't keep traveling, I need water. So Kichijiro's like, okay, you stay here, I'll go get you water. He leaves, and immediately, or actually, I guess it was like, I think in the book they said it was about like an hour or something later, the government is there, and they're like, hey, we heard you're a priest by Kichijiro. And he's like, I knew it. And I, like, when I read that, I was so mad.
Yeah.
Because, like, Kichijiro, like, we knew he was a priest. He knew he was a Christian, even though he, like...
Didn't say he was a Christian.
And, like, he's openly been like, yeah, I stepped on the fumi a couple of times, like, all this stuff. But, like, and, he brings the priest in, and they're like, step on the fumi, and he's like, no, not at all. And then as he's, like, in prison, he, like, Kichijiro comes into the prison. He's, like, to the priest, he's, like, begging for mercy. He's like, I'm a Christian. Can I please... Oh, what's the word when it's, like, they're expressing, they're, like, this is all my sins I've done. When there's, like, the priest is in the box.
What are you talking about?
And they're next to them. That one thing.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Confessional!
Confessional! He's, like, trying to be like, can I have my confessionals to you? And the priest is like, as a priest, yes. But he's like,
as your friend, absolutely not.
He hates this man.
Yeah.
And so, like, Kichijiro, like, is sobbing and is like, this is everything I've done. Like, I'm such a ratchet Christian. Like, I've done so many bad things.
Awful dude.
I know. Like, the reader just, like, sitting there like, you idiot. We've been new. It was so mad, but also so heartbreaking because this man was just sobbing. Yeah. And then the guards came by and they were like, bro, are you a Christian? He's like, no. And they're like, okay, bet. Step on the fumi. And he does. He, like, steps on it. He, like, stamps his feet on it and then he, like, walks free. Completely.
Okay, but, like, that follows the same, like, okay, I'm getting heated, but, like, I'm following the same logic I just asked, like, 2 minutes ago. Like,
yeah.
What if I just did, and then he just immediately just turned around and was like,
I'm a Christian.
Priest, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry for stepping on it in your face.
I feel like that's definitely...
Also, like, I'm sorry.
You're good, continue.
You said they're all plates of metal. Do they just, like, have them in their back pocket?
Kind of.
That's like, so weird.
I know, just be carrying it around. But also, they're not always metal. Sometimes they're made out of wood.
Okay.
But, like, you know...
Just, like, here, let me whip out my...
I'm gonna whip out this tablet for you.
Yeah. That's, like, it's, like, folded up into, like, a little...
Oh, my goodness. It's thicker than that.
Yeah.
Just, like, here, excuse me, let me get out my purse and whip out the fumi.
Just, like a fan, like, you're, like...
Oh, my goodness. Oh, that's so bad. That's so bad.
I'm sorry. They should not be laughing about this.
But just, like, that's weird, though. Like,
weird to think about.
It is weird. But, yeah, they just always would have it. Because, like, they don't know whenever they're going to stumble upon a Christian, be like, yo, repent, or, like, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And all this. But, yeah. And then, like, eventually... Oh, also, let me tell you a little tidbit at the start of the book. The two priests are going there because they're hoping to figure out about their one main priest. He was, like, as big as, like, the Pope. Like, he was big guns guy who went to Japan and
disappeared.
Completely. And there was news that he had stepped on the fumi and was completely living a different life. And they were like, we don't believe this. We're going to go find him. That was a lot of the reason why they went there.
Mm-hmm.
And so this man, the priest, when he's in jail and, you know, he refuses to step on the fumi, and he's put in this one specific jail cell, and he's sitting there, and he hears what he thinks is one of the guards snoring, just all day long, snoring. And so when these the other guards come by and they're like, hey, do you want to step on the fumi? And he's like, no, but this guy is being so annoying, snoring like this. And they're like, nobody's snoring. What you're hearing are the cries and moans of the Christians who are hanging upside down in a pit with slits behind their ears, dripping blood out of their ears so they don't die immediately, so that they'll step on the fumi. And he's like, he's absolutely crushed, deep to his soul, crushed that he's been hearing his people crying and moaning like that, and he's angry because he thought it was snoring.
Yeah.
And he's just like, and they use that, they like see that, and they're like, so, priest, if you step on the fumi, we'll let all of them go. And the priest is like immediately, you know, his first thought is like, no, I'm not going to do that. And then he's like thinking about those people and like he can hear them. Yeah. And he's like, he met somebody who had been hung upside down in a pit, but he got out somehow. And he had like the slits behind his ears. Or maybe that was different. That was later in the time. Either way, he meets somebody who had been in the pit. Yeah. And had slits in his ears and, like, all that kind of stuff. Like, it hit him hard. And eventually, he steps on the fumi to let those people go. Yeah. And I believe they are let go. In a way. One of the men, no. At one point, when he was in jail, they take one of the people that he knew out of the jail, of the pits. I think he had met him in jail when he was there. And they take him out. And they're just like, I think they're calm about it, like nothing's happening, and they just slice his head off. And then everybody just walks like nothing's happening. And they just pick up the body and just, like, nothing
Casually,
happened.
Like, oh, it's every Saturday.
Like,
Cut off someone's head.
yeah, it was that, like, reading that was heartbreaking. Like, all this, they were just like, oh, yeah, we're just killing people, it's fine.
This reminds me, like, a lot more, it's very similar to what I picture the Holocaust to be like.
Yeah.
Not necessarily cutting people's heads off in the street, but, like, the idea of you can't follow this religion because I said so. It's very, very similar. And very, very dumb.
It's a lot, but also, I learned this a lot later, but after, like, all this started was because, so the main priest, oh my goodness, the main, emperor, he's, like, he hears about Christians, like, going from Europe to, like, America and, like, conquering it or whatever, you know, setting up colonies.
And he wanted to conquer.
Kind of. He wanted to keep their power in check. He was like, well, I don't want them taking any of my power, so, like, if we just, like, prosecute the Christians, they can't come over to Japan.
Leaders just kill me.
It's wild.
World leaders are just, sometimes, they're just so sick in the head. They're so power hungry.
I know, and, like, it's for the weirdest ways, and, like,
yeah.
But also what I want to know is, like, I want to read, like, their personal journals and stuff like that, be like, what exactly are going through their heads? Like, the things, like, I heard once that, like, Hitler, his first thing, that he didn't want to have the Holocaust at first, so he was like, have other things happen first.
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, well, then how did you get from point A to point to, like, the Holocaust?
Yeah.
Like, what has got to go through their mind? Hi, sweetums. To, like, get to that idea.
Well, and wasn't he Jewish, too? Or, like, his mother was Jewish?
Yeah, he had some lineage somewhere in there.
And he's like, nah, let's just kill all the Jews. What? Who?
It's your own family.
I don't understand. Like, okay. I'm on a Harry Potter kick. You know I'm on a Harry Potter kick. Voldemort kills all the, like, dirty bloods, right? Like, he kills all the half-bloods, all the non-pure blood people, basically.
Yeah.
Which is a totally different thing, because pure bloods are all inbreds, but I can go on about that.
Different thing.
Totally different conversation. But he's a half-blood himself.
Like,
His dad was a non-wizard, and he was a muggle. So how is he...
How do you get, like, ideas, like, kill all these people, even though I'm one of them?
Yeah.
Like, kill all of them, because, like, they could come after me and my power. Yeah. Like, they're dirty for whatever reason.
Like, Voldemort, his idea was because, like, he just really hated that his parents left him and that, like, he was an orphan.
Yeah.
But, like, that doesn't give you any precedence to go and kill all other, like...
Not at all.
Dirty,
even, like,
dirty-blooded, you know, like...
And, like, Hitler, like, he blamed the Jews for a lot of things, but, like,
yeah.
also they were not doing any of that.
They were just trying to live their lives.
Honestly, like, where does his racism, like, where did that stem from?
Yeah.
Like, where did it first come from? I want to know, I want to pick this man's brain. Like, I want to hear all these people's, like...
Because he was bullied.
Oh my goodness.
That was, like, that's what I hear. It's, like, because he was
bullied?
an art student. And he was bullied for it. And, like...
All these weird little things that they can stem from is just wild.
Right?
Like, But anyways, back to silence.
Yeah.
So eventually the priest steps on the Fumi to let the people go.
Yeah.
But, like, this scene was so heartbreaking, too. Like, because you see, like, he describes it as, like, the priest is looking at the Fumi and he sees Christ and Christ is, like, looking at him. He's like, it's okay. Like, you go, it's okay. And so he steps on the Fumi and, like, he's just, like, his whole soul shatters, like, more than it has this entire book. It's just, like, there's nothing left.
Right.
And so he's, like, taken, all the guards and everything are taking him to, because he's always, during all this time that he's in jail, he's asking about the man that he's there to find, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, yeah, he might be alive, he might not. And as soon as he steps on the Fumi, they're like, yeah, we'll take you to him, or, like, to that area.
Yeah.
Because that's where they've taken, like, the priests and everything that have stepped on the Fumi. They give him a whole new life, kind of.
Right.
And so they're taking him, and on the way there, they come by these other guards, and he sees Garpe. And he's like, Garpe's alive!
Yeah.
But, like,
Forgot about him. Forgot he existed, actually.
I know. During a lot of this book, we completely forget that he existed, because it's just, like, they split ways, and that was it.
Right.
Until he sees Garpe again. He's like, that's my friend. And, Garpe was traveling with these other Christians, and and the government found them, and they were like, okay, Garpe, if you don't, we're gonna give you an ultimatum. We're gonna put your people we're gonna wrap them all up in these like heavy, like we're gonna like burrito wrap these people in extremely heavy stuff and bring them out on a ship, well, a boat, into the middle of the water and just dump them over.
Yeah.
Unless he stepped on the fumi, and he refused to. And he was like, please don't do that to them, though, like, anything else. And they're like, nope, step on the fumi or do it. And they, like, start throwing people off, and Garpe gets away from these people, and he starts swimming up to these people. But, you know, he's not a great swimmer. He goes out there, and he drowns. And the priest is watching his friend die. Like, he describes how he just, like, watches Garpe's head get smaller and smaller and smaller, and go down under the waves, come back up, and then go down under the waves, and then just stays there.
Not come back.
Oh, man, that was shattering to read that. Because, like, I was just imagining, like, Garpe was, like, almost, like, his best friend in, like, a not very close to him kind of way.
Yeah. Like Alana to me.
Yeah. Somebody close to you, but, like...
Not close to you. Like, we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah.
Like,
10 out of 10 would die for them, but, like, at the same time, we're not gonna tell each other every secret ever.
Yeah.
But, like, and then they just because, like, they stop, and they're like, hey, look at this priest doing all this stuff. And so they take the priest away from Garpe and all that stuff after all this has happened, and they're like, they bring him into the village, and he meets the priest that they had gone there for, the big guy, and he's like, yeah, I stepped on the fumi. And he's like, you can tell he's like, his soul is shattered.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty
He's
sure...
a broken man.
Yes, big time. Like, they've given him a wife, home, money, new name, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, this is what's happened to you. They were right. Back at home, we were, like, refused to believe any of this happened because they refused to believe this man had, like...
Betrayed them, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gone away from the entire church. Because he was, like...
The man.
They're, like, oh, man. And, like... They give the priest all these new things, and like the book ends with just like the priest. He can never leave Japan. He can never go home, and like he's understood that like the moment he stepped on Japan, he was like, I'm not gonna go home. Like he felt it in his soul.
There's no way.
Yeah.
Make it home.
And it's just like reading the end of that book, like it was just like that actually happened. That was an actual
crazy
thing. It's absolutely crazy. I could never ever put myself in that kind of situation.
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Like. The Holocaust, going back to that, like, I could never, like, what would I do?
And, like, they can't even be like, okay, I'm not Jewish anymore. They can,
like, they were branded for life.
Mm-hmm. There's no way they could get away from that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And even if they lie about it, like, they don't look the part either. Like, it's heartbreaking.
It is.
And the fact that people are just, like, because of your religion or because of, like, your background, we hate you, all of our problems are your fault.
Yes.
This innocent person. All of these are on your head. Chop it off.
Yeah.
That's wild to me.
Me too. It's just, I don't understand how people can be so judgmental, period.
Honestly.
Like.
These are human beings. It's wild. Yeah, that's wild. But also... What?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, if they follow Buddhism, I've learned a lot about religion in the last couple of years. Buddhism stems from a version of Christianity, which is just, like, a funny thing to me. Like, most religions do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Allah is God.
Yep.
And that's, the Muslim word. So, like, it's just crazy to me that somebody can be like, well, I just follow Jesus a little bit differently than you, so you gotta die.
Yeah. Like, you don't call them by the same names I do, so you're wrong.
Yeah.
Die.
I mean, Buddha was really just a man.
Yep.
But, like, he worshipped God through meditation and through chakras and, like...
all this.
Aligning your soul.
And believing that he was like God in a way, that he didn't eat food or water and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's wild.
Yeah. But also, okay, so this class, we had to read a series of short stories, Kawabata short stories, and, like, these stories were absolutely incredible. Like, they were very short, but, like, if you look between the lines, there was so much more happening.
Yeah.
Like, one of the last ones we read was about this man. His wife had passed away in the hospital, so her family, like, brought the husband in, and they were like, hey, will you look at her for us? And, like, he goes in there, and he sees his dead wife, and, like, he, like, explains how she looked absolutely horrifying.
Yeah.
Her face looked nothing the way it had, and her eyes were wide open. She was just like... And he was like...
Gone.
He was looking at her and he was like, hey, can I have a moment with her? And they all leave. And what does this man do?
Kisses her.
No, he touches her face. Like, moves her eyes, closes her eyes, maneuvers her face so that she looks beautiful. And, like, the family, like, the mom and the sister come in, and they're like, you fixed her, like, she's so beautiful, and they're just, like, sobbing. They're like, this is our daughter, like, your wife, and all this stuff. And, like, as me and my group looked at it, we were like, where had this man been? He had been on a train to get there. Why hadn't he been there with his wife? Like,
Yeah.
was there a reason? Like, had they split up? And then, like, why had the family not known about it? They were, like, completely just like, yeah, this is her husband. Bring him in. Like, he obviously loves her. Like, they acted like they knew nothing was between the two. And, like,
That story confuses me.
there's a lot behind the scenes that are possible.
Yeah.
Because, like, how much of the family was there? Because, like, in the book, they never explained explicitly, like, these people were there. But, like, the lady's mom and her sister were both in the room with their daughter, the lady, as she passed away. But, like, how did she die? Why was the man not there? And, like, who were all of the family? And why were they all just, like, standing there?
Yeah.
And, like, he just wanted a moment alone. And, like, why does he just, like, feel so comfortable touching her face? He doesn't cry at all. He's just, like, it's weird. And at the start, nobody's crying at all. And then as soon as, like, he touches her face and, like, maneuvers her face, they all start sobbing because they're like, that's our daughter.
Well, I think, like, as somebody who's seen, like, death,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's so shocking, especially, like when my grandma passed. Her mouth was wide open. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she laid there, like, she was, like,
Yeah.
she was, like, sleeping, basically. And, like, what if they were, like, that's not her. Like, it didn't click in their heads because her eyes were wide open. She would never do that. And
Her
she
face was contorted.
Yeah, her face was contorted. Why would she look like that? Yeah,
Hi, honey.
you think so? And then, like all that, and then he changed it to, like, what they remember. And they're like, oh, wait a second. Oh, shoot, she is dead.
That's fair. Because also in the book, in the story, they explained how she had dyed her face contorted with so much pain.
Yeah.
Like, that's why, like, there were so many things that, like, the author never tells in any of his stories. And so, like, us reading them, like, we had to look between the lines, and, like, all of us were like, well, what if this, and this? You know, like,
Yeah. Just
like,
theorizing.
all these
But you'll
things.
never know.
Never. At all. And, like, there's so many of these stories throughout the entire book. It's so fascinating. I loved these books.
Yeah.
Because, like, we were all sitting there reading these, like, simple lines, and then they were explaining how, like, this man lived right next to a funeral home, and, like, there were all these flowers everywhere, and, like, there were these specific flowers, and, like, why were they so important to him, and, like, why would everybody went into that bathroom, fixed their makeup, and then left. Like, they were sobbing outside, came into the bathroom, looked fine, cleaned themselves up, left, and why this one girl came in looking fine, broke down crying, fixed herself, looked at her mirror, and left. There were, like, all these things that, like, we'll never understand, like, why those people were crying and then came into the bathroom and they were fine. Why this girl was fine, came into the bathroom and was sobbing, and, like, why, like, all these things that we don't know about. Like, why were these flowers so specifically perfect, extremely perfect to this man? Like, all these stories had such deeper meanings behind them. But
See, that last one that you said, like, not reminds me, but, like, as somebody who believes in the supernatural, it's like, well, he's dead. Like, that's how I, think about it. It's like, he's dead. Those flowers were the ones that they had most at his funeral. And all those people that came in were just like, this is so-and-so. Like, he was me. He was, like, my father, he was my brother, he was my best friend. And that's why they sobbed when they came in, and he was like, okay, I need to compose myself before I leave. And they went to the bathroom, fixed himself, and left.
But also his family. He was living in a flat with his family.
Oh, his family was there.
Yeah, that's how I was
Well,
like.
maybe the whole family is gone.
Or, yeah, I guess that's possible. We'll have no idea.
No.
Because, like, yeah, that whole story there's, like, all those stories that are just kind of, like, very fascinating. Like, there was another one about canaries. Like, this man had a mistress outside of his marriage, and they had been, in love, and she gave him these canaries that she had gotten him.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, the man and his wife had been taking care of the canaries her entire life. And then she passed away, and he was, like, writing a letter to this lady and was like, hey, your canaries are dying because my wife isn't here to take care of them, and I can't take care of them. I can't bring them back to the cellar. Like, would you mind if I just killed them? And he was like, I know, it was bizarre.
Why would you just...
Birds
I can't
are not
take
that
care
hard.
of it. Let's just kill it.
I know, it was wild. But, like, also in the letter that he wrote to her, he was like, I know we said we would never talk again, but like, my wife is dead. Your canaries that you gave me are dying. Like, can I kill them? Like, is that fine? Like, there's so many, like...
Layers, like what?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So many layers. And, like, oh, that makes these stories so fascinating. They were just wild. Yeah.
Weird.
I loved these books.
What were they called?
Kawabata stories, like Palm of the Hand stories. I might be talking about 2 different books, but, like, we read 2 different books full of, like, short stories.
Yeah.
I believe it was the Palm of the Hand story. No, it was called... it was one or the other.
Sure. I'll do research, because that sounds like something I'd be interested in.
I can lend you the book, because, like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to read all of those.
Yeah.
Because they're so cool. Or, like, I could lend you... Like, we could do, like, books...
Like book club.
A book club. You're like, hey, girl, I just read this one. You need to read it, and we need to chat about it.
Yeah.
Like, they're so fascinating, and they're short, so they're easy to read. We would always read them at least 3 times, because you don't notice everything the first time.
No.
And then, like, after the 3rd time, you're like, oh.
Like,
And especially when you're reading it out loud. Like, sometimes in my group, I would have to be the one reading it aloud. And I would be like... And then my group members would be talking about this, and I'd be like, well, when I read this part... And they'd be like, oh, I didn't even, like, think about that. And I was like, yeah, but I'm like, I physically said it, so like, it made more in my mind.
You can, like, process it better.
Oh, it was
You make
wild.
things out loud. Yeah.
But, like, also these short story books were such stark differences from, like, The Waiting Years and Silence.
Yeah.
But, like, all these stories, like, showed
How much... all just sad.
Yeah. But, like, also the progression.
Yeah,
Because, like, even in the short stories that we read, like, sometimes women were just kind of objects, but, like, in a more modern way.
Right.
Or, like, all these things were just kind of, like, same background ideas, but, like, newer.
Right.
It was wild.
That is weird.
Because, like, in Silence and... Well, I guess in Silence, like, they never really talked about women. Like, there were some women, like, in the village and everything, and, like, they would cook the men's stuff and, like, all that jazz, but, like, they weren't big
They weren't
characters
yeah.
at all. And I guess,
Which
like...
could be said to, like, the time period, too. Is like, women were not main characters.
And, like, women have never been priests. Like, that's not a thing right now at all,
right?
either.
Growing up, I kind of wanted to be, like, a preacher.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, at Bethel...
Pastor.
One of my favorite preachers was a lady. It was a woman, an African-American woman. She was so beautiful.
That.
She was so good at what she did. Oh, it was stunning.
I've always wanted, yeah. Different story, different time.
But, like, it shows such, like, the culture, but, like, the progression of how it's changed.
Yeah.
And, like, it's wild. And especially when we learn, like, the history behind all of these books and everything, it was wild. Because, like, when we read, like, Silence, and then we learned a little bit about the history behind it, and then, like, towards the end more, as I was doing, like, my project and everything, I was looking at them more, and, like, we were learning more about them, and I was like, oh, like, I didn't know all these things about, like, how Japan had been progressing so much, and then the new emperor came in, and he had a lot of power, and he was like, okay, feudal lords, I'm gonna have heavy taxation on y'all so that you can't take any of my power away. And then he was like, okay, but also these Christians, hear about them going to America and colonizing, going everywhere and, like, spreading Christianity like wildfire. And he's like, I don't want that. I'm going to persecute them. No Christians in Japan. Close our borders to everyone but, like, the Dutch.
Yeah.
And then, like, after he passed away, or, like, times after him, Japan opened up a lot more and, like, progressed a lot.
Yeah. Now, isn't it one of the most progressive countries right now?
I think so.
I think so, too.
Because, like, there's such a stark difference between, like, they have been, like, samurai.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
oh, yeah. That's, like, one of my favorite time periods to learn about is, like, samurai and, like...
And, like, the things that they believed in, like, their armor. Oh, it was so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. And, I forgot my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
No. They've been, like, gone from samurai to, like, westernizing everything. Like, the emperor was, like, all for all this stuff. Like, everything was happening, and there were, like, half the people were like, no, samurai times, we don't want this new stuff. And then, like, the other half were like, no, we want the new western times. Like,
well, I just, because I don't know if you know either. Do they still have an emperor?
I I kind of wonder if they do, and it's like their emperor is like
The Queen of England.
yeah, where it's just
Like,
kind of like a standpoint.
It's
Sorry.
title. No, you're good. I thought it was the cat.
But like, yeah, I think if anything, I think that's what it is. Cause like I've never heard
Of
specifically
anything else.
Yeah, cause like if they would have gotten rid of the emperor, I would have think it would have been a really big deal.
Right? But like also if they got rid of him like forever ago.
Yeah, that's fair. But also, well, they had an emperor in like Babe Ruth's time because Babe Ruth was there.
Yeah.
And like,
So that's true. It does.
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah.
But just like throughout all these books and like even some of the movie or like the movie we watched, like The Last Samurai, we watched that movie. Like you just saw like the progression.
Yeah.
Is there an emperor?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Wild.
I cannot read any of this. Naruhito is the current emperor of Japan. He acceded to the chrysanthemum throne upon the abdiction of his father, Emperor Emeritus. I'm butchering this. On May 1st, 2019.
Oh wow.
Yeah, his role of the emperor has been historically altered, became
Yeah.
a larger ceremonial symbol that is then an actual ruler, imperial ruler. So yeah, it's just like the Queen of England.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Yeah, because like Japan went from being so closed off to now we have so many like we buy so much stuff from them or like
Yeah, or
all
like the
these-
tourism is like crazy.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And their progression in like technology
Yes.
is insane.
Oh my god, that's one of the reasons why I want to go to Japan. Because I'm like,
I want to ride a bullet train.
I-
That's my bucket list.
I want to be in one of the pods. Like that's where I want to sleep.
Yeah.
In one of the pods. I feel like
those
it'd be
are
so cool.
Oh, I just want to go there, see the modern times, and like read like the waiting years again. Read
Yeah.
silence again, because like sitting in like one of those pods, like extremely different times, reading about their past, like
Okay.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Cause like we here, I wanna talk. Oh, it'd be so cool to talk to like people. Be like, hey, what's your family history like? Or like, have you heard
Yeah.
of like these books? Or like, ask people
They're like,
about.
no.
Yeah, they'd probably be like so confused.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, I just want to pick people's brain.
Yeah.
That would be so cool.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
Yeah. The elderly are like my favorite because I can just sit there and talk for hours like about
They
you
have
know the
so
Vietnam
many
War or like
stories.
yeah.
Like, oh, when I was interviewing my grandma this one time, oh, she could have talked. I could have talked to her for days.
Yeah.
I had like 50 questions or whatever to ask her, and she just like was like telling me all these things. She was like, yeah, all this, and this. Like when my dad was in the war and we were fighting and moving around, like Germany was my favorite place we lived in. We had all these dachshunds and like all this kind of stuff. I was
Is
like,
that why she likes
yeah, her family
Nice.
always had them.
I love it. I love
It's
it.
cute. Yeah, wasn't that cool?
Yeah.
I love reading history through books.
And one of my I like learning history through humans.
Yeah.
But like no, me too. I like books too.
All of it.
And like
All the
TVs.
history.
Just give me the history, yeah. When I was part of a church in northern Minnesota, there was this guy who had severe PTSD and I'm pretty sure he was on the autistic spectrum, but also that could be part of his PTSD. Like I genuinely don't know what was wrong mentally with him, but he fought in the Vietnam War and he would just sit after church and just talk to me about it for
Oh,
hours. And he was the nicest guy ever. His name was John and I miss him very much.
Uh-huh.
I just don't go to that church anymore, but I really like
and like that's also a thing. Like you can talk to the most like mentally gone person. You ask a question about their past, they open up
yeah.
as if like a whole library is
Right?
inside of this person's mind.
Right?
And like, when you hear oral stories like that, or when you read like fictional books, like those, there's a lot
And
of
you're like
similar points in there. Like it shows so much of the culture and the history.
you know what is crazy that I just like blows my mind every time I think about it? The fact that Martin Luther King Jr. and Anne Frank were born in the same year.
I know.
Like, we don't learn history. We learn it as, like, a linear thing, not as if it's, like, all happening at the same time. Which I feel like that's something that needs to be taught differently.
Mhm.
Because, like, nobody thinks about that. Nobody thinks that, like...
The fact that like
There's
Cleopatra was closer to the iPhone than she was the
Yes.
building of the Great Pyramid.
Yes!
That's so wild.
Cleopatra is an interesting woman.
Honestly, but that's a whole other
It
conversation.
is. We can
History, man. Am I
let's
right?
just talk about history.
Okay, I'm down.
Next 10 years.
History is wild.
History is what? Yeah, you think so?
You like history, meows? Yeah. So fascinating.
It is very fascinating.
That's what I love about this class is like we'd hear this histories and we'd read the books and it's just like everything clicks and it's just
And it
wild.
just all makes sense. like
This whole timeline of information.
yeah.
Oh, it's great.
Peaky Blinders. We should watch that this morning.
TV show.
Yeah,
I'm down.
It's about a historical gang
History.
in Birmingham,
Ah.
and they put. Okay, I don't know if this is based off a real thing or not, but like the gang, why they call it the Peaky Blinders. I don't know about the Peaky part, but the blinders is because they have these hats, and they have a razor blade. And so when they fight, they'll take off their hat and then just slice your eyes. Right?
That's wild.
It's so wild. It's so cool.
That's wild.
That's horrible to say, but it's so interesting. Like, who would have thought? You know?
Or like the fact that like, sorry, I'm gonna relate back to the.
No, you're good.
Sorry, but like how they figured out that like people will die so fast just being hung upside down. Cut a little slip behind their ears.
It stresses me out.
Like, I have an older brother, you know, like, he's
Yeah.
held me upside down for multiple times. Like,
Of
my
course,
face gets
of course.
beat red. And, like, you're struggling. You're not
Yeah.
happy.
Right.
And, like, I slip behind your ears and you just, like, slowly are dripping
It's
out.
because it releases the pressure.
And, like, imagine, like, how your toes are not used to having no blood there. And, like, especially if you're being hung
would
from
break
your
off.
feet.
They would literally break off. It's just like in medieval times where they would use different torture devices, like, this sounds so horrible, but my favorite one is where they would take a clamp on your tongue and just hang you by your tongue.
Yeah.
Like, and then it would just swell and then you'd suffocate. But like,
The weird, or, like, the ways that they're, like, how can we torture people but keep them alive?
yes, like there was one where they would put you in a barrel and they'd lock you in a barrel with a hungry rat.
Yeah.
So they would eat through you. What?
Oh, that's wild.
That's so crazy.
Oh, history is so wild.
It is so
okay.
weird.
My phone's gonna die, so let's stop here.
Okay.
But did you enjoy learning about these books?
I did, and it made me interesting to read them.
I know, this was really fun talking about them.
It was.
Like, it's so fun talking to a person who, like, never read these books. Like, I've been talking to people in class who've been like, yeah, like, these certain, like, things, these points and, like, all these parts in the book are, like, you're telling this story a little bit wrong. Like, that didn't happen here.
Right,
like, the
right.
priest was in jail, like, these many times. Like,
Right.
these things happen. And you're like, sure.
Fantastic.
All of this has gotta be true. 'Cause I have no idea.
Right.
Oh, it's fascinating.
I love it.
Thank you for making this podcast with me.
Of course. We should do it again sometime. It was actually a lot of fun.
I know, this is really fun. Thank you.
Bye.